The Indian subcontinent stands on a precipice. The long-standing tensions between India and Pakistan have flared into open conflict once again. The latest crisis, ignited by a horrific terrorist attack in Indian-administered Kashmir, has pushed the two nuclear-armed neighbors dangerously close to the brink of war. With each passing day, the situation grows more volatile, raising fears of a wider conflagration with devastating consequences for the region and the world. The specter of a nuclear exchange, once unthinkable, now looms as a terrifying possibility. The roots of this conflict run deep, entangled in the tumultuous history of partition and the unresolved dispute over Kashmir. Since gaining independence in 1947, India and Pakistan have fought three major wars, each leaving behind a legacy of mistrust and animosity. The two nations have been locked in a perpetual state of hostility, their shared border a constant flashpoint. The current crisis marks a dangerous escalation, threatening to unravel decades of fragile peace and plunge the region into a new era of conflict. The international community watches with bated breath, hoping for a swift de-escalation. However, the path to peace remains fraught with obstacles. Both sides seem entrenched in their positions, fueled by nationalist sentiment and a deep-seated mistrust of the other. The risk of miscalculation is high, and even a small spark could ignite a firestorm. The coming days and weeks will be critical in determining whether the region can step back from the abyss, or whether it will plunge headlong into a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. On April 22, 2025, the serene beauty of Pahalgam, a popular tourist destination in Indian-administered Kashmir, was shattered by a barbaric act of terrorism. A suicide bomber, laden with explosives, detonated himself amidst a group of Hindu pilgrims visiting the sacred Amarnath temple. The blast ripped through the crowd, leaving behind a scene of utter carnage. Bodies were strewn across the once peaceful landscape, and the air was thick with the smell of blood and gunpowder. The attack sent shockwaves throughout India, evoking memories of past atrocities and igniting widespread outrage. The death toll from the attack ultimately reached 28, with scores more injured, many critically. Most of the victims were ordinary citizens, families on pilgrimage, shopkeepers, and local residents, caught in the crossfire of a conflict not of their making. The attack was a stark reminder of the human cost of the enduring conflict in Kashmir. India wasted no time in pointing fingers at Pakistan, accusing it of harboring the terrorist groups responsible for the attack. New Delhi claimed that the attack bore the hallmarks of Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, both designated terrorist organizations with known links to Pakistan's intelligence services. India's accusations were met with denials from Islamabad, which rejected any involvement in the attack and accused India of exploiting the tragedy to further its own agenda in Kashmir. The attack in Pahalgam marked a turning point in the already fraught relationship between India and Pakistan. It shattered the fragile peace that had held for several years and unleashed a wave of anger and resentment that threatened to spiral out of control. The Indian government came under immense pressure to respond decisively, with calls for retaliation growing louder by the day. The stage was set for a dangerous escalation, with both sides seemingly locked on a collision course. On May 7, 2025, 12 days after the devastating attack in Pahalgam, India launched a series of airstrikes against what it claimed were terrorist training camps operating across the line of control inside Pakistan-administered Kashmir. The operation, codenamed Operation Sindoor, was India's way of sending a clear and unambiguous message to Pakistan that it would no longer tolerate its neighbors' support for cross-border terrorism. The operation, named after the vermilion powder worn by Hindu widows, symbolized India's mourning for the victims of the Pahalgam attack. Indian Air Force jets, armed with precision-guided munitions, struck a total of 9 targets, including alleged training camps, ammunition dumps, and communication centers. India claimed that the strikes were carried out with pinpoint accuracy, targeting only terrorist infrastructure and minimizing civilian casualties. The strikes, according to Indian officials, were a preemptive measure aimed at preventing future attacks on Indian soil. Pakistan, however, disputed India's claims, stating that the strikes had caused significant civilian casualties and damaged civilian infrastructure including mosques and a hydroelectric dam. According to Pakistani authorities, at least 31 civilians, including women and children, were killed in the Indian airstrikes. Pakistan condemned the strikes as an act of aggression and a violation of its sovereignty, vowing to respond forcefully. The international community reacted with a mixture of concern and condemnation. While some countries, including the United States, expressed understanding for India's right to self-defense, they also urged restraint and called for both sides to avoid further escalation. The strikes marked a significant escalation in the conflict between India and Pakistan, raising fears of a wider conflagration. Pakistan, reeling from the Indian airstrikes and determined to demonstrate its own military prowess, responded with a counteroffensive dubbed Operation Bunyan al-Marsus. On May 10, 2025, Pakistani fighter jets, including advanced JF-17 Thunder and F-16 Fighting Falcons, crossed the line of control and targeted several Indian military installations. The operation's name, translating to the solid structure, reflected Pakistan's resolve in the face of Indian aggression. Among the targets hit were the Pathankot Air Base, which had been attacked by terrorists in 2016, the Udhampur Air Force Base, and a suspected missile storage facility. Pakistan claimed to have used hypersonic missiles in the attack, and asserted that it had successfully neutralized India's S-400 air defense system at the Udhampur Air Base. Pakistan claimed that its strikes were limited to military targets, and that it had taken precautions to avoid civilian casualties. India, while acknowledging the Pakistani strikes, downplayed the extent of the damage. India denied that its S-400 systems had been compromised, and asserted that it had successfully repelled the Pakistani attack, shooting down several enemy aircraft in the process. India also claimed that Pakistan had deliberately targeted civilian areas, including a school and a mosque in the village of Bunyan, where debris from a downed Pakistani jet reportedly landed. The aerial confrontation between India and Pakistan involved over 125 fighter jets, marking one of the largest dogfights in the history of the subcontinent. The skies over Kashmir became a battleground as the two air forces engaged in a deadly dance, each side trying to gain the upper hand. The intensity of the fighting and the advanced weaponry employed raised fears of a wider conflict. Section 5, Escalation and Global Alarm. As the conflict rages on, the toll has been immense. Lives lost, families torn apart, and communities shattered. The economic impact is staggering, with resources diverted to sustain the war effort. Amid the chaos, diplomatic efforts are intensifying. Leaders from around the world are engaging in talks, hoping to broker a ceasefire. The stakes couldn't be higher as the prospect of peace hangs in the balance. For those living in the war zone, daily life is a constant struggle. Basic necessities are scarce, and the fear of violence is ever present. Yet, amidst the hardship, stories of resilience and solidarity emerge, showcasing the indomitable human spirit. Despite the ongoing conflict, there is a glimmer of hope. Recent negotiations have shown promise, and there is a cautious optimism that peace might be within reach. However, the path to lasting peace remains fraught with challenges.